Hey there, welcome to another video on chess compositions. This is Bharat Divyang from Zugzwang Academy. And in today's position, which I have titled Winning the Unwinnable, White needs to play and win the game. Now, here's the thing about compositions. Compositions are basically chess positions that is created by a puzzle setter, somebody who wants to create puzzles and problems. And usually these are positions that you might not typically see in an actual game. However, this looks deceptively a possibility in an actual game as well. All right, so let's take a moment to kind of understand this position and then see why it seems like the unwin. Also remember that a lot of these positions are going to have a lot of subtle puzzles within, right? So we are equally trying to figure out what those puzzles are here. So the way we will be doing the composition today is to stop at every moment. I'll set up a particular puzzle for you and you should pause the video and try to solve it for the maximum benefit. Okay, so here's the position where it looks like black is going to promote. And thanks to the way the white rooks are situated, there's no way that white can control this in time. For example, this rook is blocked by his own king. And that's the reason he cannot come here to the first rank to block the promotion. And this rook is blocked by the pawns here. So therefore, he also cannot come. So now the first choice is white needs to move something. He needs to prevent it. It looks very clear that he cannot control the promotion square, which is a1. And therefore, the only recourse is to try and give a check and see how that works. And there are only two possible checks. One is this and the other is this. The puzzle, the first question for you in this composition is which one of this is correct and why. So if you think about it, initially it doesn't seem like much. It seems like, okay, what's the big deal? I could just go about trying and giving a check anyway, right? But as you evaluate it, you'll realize the problem with this particular check. The problem is that once king goes here, once he moves to this particular square, there's absolutely no way of preventing the promotion because this rook can't come here, he would get captured. This rook is anyway blocked, so he can't come there either. And there's no more checks left. So since there are no more checks left, that is the reason this puzzle ends at that very moment. So you cannot really move the rook here to give a check. So the question now is, if that check is not possible, why not with this rook? And that's the correct answer. This rook is the right answer. So you could say, okay, what's the big deal? And can't he do the same thing again? And that's where there is a bit of a catch. And what I want you to do is to pause the video here and think about what that catch could be. Okay, welcome back. And I hope you were able to figure out. So this is the position. Imagine the white rook from the G file comes to B8, gives you a check, and black decides to move the king to A3. What would be the way out? And the answer is rook takes pawn, and once black promotes, rook takes pawn on a6, gives a check, and it's a mate. So it doesn't matter that he promotes, the game is over. The same thing applies for a4 as well. So whether it's a4 or this one doesn't matter. But there's a small difference. a5 is slightly different now. Okay, so imagine you're giving the same check and king goes to a5. What's your counter? So this is puzzle number 2 for you. So you can pause the video here and try to think about what could be the way out if the king actually moves to a5. All right, welcome back. I hope you were able to solve it. So rook to b8 check, king comes to a5, and the answer is still the same. Rook captures a7, black promotes, but you continue to capture the pawn and essentially threaten to skewer. I mean, it's like you're forcing the king to take back the rook. And once he takes it back on a6, the other rook, which is here, can just move here and be able to skewer the whole thing. So that's how you would solve this puzzle. So that is the reason the very first move is basically rook to b8, but rook g to b8. So that ensures that the escape hatch that the king has on the a file is completely closed. And that doesn't work for him, right? So let's reiterate. So if this particular rook from the a file comes here to give a check, king just comes here, there's no more checks available and you can't stop the promotion, black wins the game. Or at least it looks like the best that white can hope for would be a draw. So if he doesn't move the a file but instead moves the g file and the king comes here, then rook captures, you promote, rook captures again, it's a check and a mate. And this is the same story. Even if the king were to choose a4, he would still go about doing the same thing. He promotes, capture it with the checkmate. But this is slightly different, because if he moves it here, then you have a check, and he promotes, and you might think like, oh my god, it's over, but not really. You sacrifice the rook, you skewer the king, and then capture the bishop and the queen behind it. And therefore, white has a rook. It might take him a couple more moves, but definitely it's a win. So this clearly tells you that the only correct move here is rook g to b8, and now the king has a way out. So we have just eliminated 3 of them, and he has the option to move to any of these 3. Which among these 3 would be the correct one? So this is puzzle number 3 within this composition. Take a moment and try to think about it. And the answer is he has to move to c3, because if he were to move to c4, all you have to do is give a check, the king moves, you come to c1, and you stop the promotion. So even if the king moves here, or he actually tries to promote it, the game kind of is over. Because, white could just sacrifice the rook for the pawn. In the worst case, use the other rook to capture these 2 pawns which are far away, and then still continue to win the game. So that's the reason the king can't really go to c5 or c4. So he has to come to c3, so that when the check happens, you can come back here and control the c1 square. So now let's apply the same thing. Why not come to b2? There's a problem with b2. The check on b2 would mean a completely different one. So this is puzzle number 4. Why can't the king come to b2? Okay, and the answer is, if he comes to b2, now you can give a check with the other rook. And if he goes away to a3, you can bring the rook here and stop the promotion. And if he goes into a1, then it's just rook to c1 checkmate. Right? So that's the reason that when he comes here with a check, the king has to move only to d2. Okay, and then now continues the story. So you give a check here, the king again has 6 options, either to c file or to e file. Now here's the problem. If he were to move to c file, even c1, all white has to do is give a check, king has to move to the b file, and then you can bring your rook here and control the promotion, which basically would mean that you can win the game. Right? So this fails too, and that's the reason you would keep moving. And just now you get the idea. So you keep giving a check and the king keeps moving. And at this moment he would really think, all right, all I gotta do is get to the g file and there's no more any check. And this is where the game completely changes, because there's an amazing move here which will ensure that white wins. But we look at that in part 2 of the same composition next week. Until then, you are free to think about it and leave your comments saying what the answer might be. I hope you like this composition, all the puzzles within, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much.